Welcome back to Tide Pod and the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton and Tony Sukalis recapping another victory for Alabama basketball that propelled them to being tied with Auburn at the top of the SEC. The Tigers, of course, losing. We're going to talk about that to kind of end things off. The IBOB getting very spicy ahead of next Saturday's game. Obviously, the message from Nate Oats continues to be the game's right in front of Alabama, which it nearly blew the first one of its two-game road trip. The Tide, of course, faces Texas as well. We'll do a preview of that looking ahead. But Alabama nearly blew it against Arkansas, Tony, on Saturday night in Fayetteville. The Tide winning 85-81. It was not that close for much of this game, and that's, I think, a kind of a good place to start here, as we kind of dissect this last performance for Alabama, what sort of went wrong, how the Tide were able to let the Razorbacks back in it. I think that's a good place to start. Arkansas, they made an 18-point comeback at one point in this game. Alabama was up 71-53 with 8 minutes left. Arkansas then went on I believe it was a 28-8 or 23-8 run, in the next few minutes. Tide made it a 3-point game with about 2 minutes to go. Alabama, in that span before the run, or I guess it was in the first 4 minutes or first 8 minutes of the game, had one turnover, had 4 in the final 12 minutes, finished with 14 for the game, had a bunch in the first half too that kind of made things close at the beginning. They were able to kind of stretch it in the opening part of the second half, which is not a thing we're used to this Crimson Tide team, but then just kind of let its foot off the gas. And that sort of seemed like it was the message from Nate Oats. And I want to talk about the turnover stuff specifically in a second, but Tony, from your observations from what Nate Oats said after the game, what did you assess kind of went wrong here? It felt like Alabama just kind of sleptwalked through the middle portion of that game. And as Arkansas showed, you can't do that against anyone in the SEC.
Like, we keep on saying that Alabama can't do this against good teams. And it's like they haven't necessarily faced the team that can hurt them. Fortunately, they didn't let their foot off the gas, early enough for Arkansas to come back. I mean, they were able to build, what'd you say? Like, I forget what it was, an 18-point lead or a 16-point lead deep. It's kind of funny, Jack. I was looking at the crowd, and it seemed like all the crowd was gone. And then, like, you look back, and then they're, like, all back in their seats when Arkansas came back. It's like, did they, like, sneak back in? Or I don't know. I saw, like Alabama was, emptying the stadium pretty much, 3/4 of the way through the second half. And then just it really felt like this game was over. And all of a sudden, Arkansas, whether it was Avicius just couldn't miss from three. They hit all the big shots. They really kind of capitalized off of the momentum, in the building. And, I'm sitting over at you. The delete key on Jack Knowlton's computer had some serious work during this on his instant gamer. It's just, I think you're right. I think, when you look at what went wrong, I think Alabama just kind of thought it was over, kind of let Arkansas back into the game. And this is an Arkansas team that, credit to them, it would have been really easy to pack it in, especially with, some of the early struggles this season. I think it would have been easy for them to be like, okay, here it goes again, coming off of 2 big wins, but, playing Alabama, it's over. This is what happened earlier in the season. Pack it in. And they didn't do that. They kept on fighting, and Alabama took its foot off the gas, and you saw what happened. On the same hand, I will say it is very hard to beat Alabama. So if it's almost impossible to beat Alabama if they get a 16-point lead. So, I mean, they were able to survive just based on their strong start. But once again, like, if you build up, I don't necessarily think that they're going to build up a 16, 18-point lead versus Auburn. But if this happened against Auburn, or if this happened against Tennessee or Florida, Alabama would have lost. But I don't know. I mean, like, it's kind of hard to imagine even Alabama getting a 16-point lead against any of those teams. But at the same time, if Alabama starts a game like this, or if they start a second half like this against a good team, they're going to be cooked. And I think this should be like another one of these messages that Nate Oats kind of pushes forward to his team.
Yeah, I was really telling after the game. I asked Nate about that, kind of trying to say, you got off to that start in the second half. I think it was a 6-0 run, ballooned into an 11-6 run. And that is the start to halves that he's been looking for, right? That's where the struggles have usually been, where they just don't start these halves really well, and then teams kind of are able to stay into the game from there. Alabama didn't have that. Their start of the half was good, and then still from there they looked up at the scoreboard, and that's what Nate Oats kind of said. It's, we can't play the scoreboard. We have to play to get better every possession. That's how we bury teams. You don't worry about the score. You worry about, you know, what was going wrong, even when it's not too many things, and to try and keep your foot on the gas. And it's very clear they didn't do that. And you're totally right. The talent on this team means that multiple factors have to come in along with taking your foot off the gas. That's, I think, what we saw against Ole Miss. It's, you got to take your foot off the gas, and you only shoot 67% from the free throw line, which they shot against Arkansas. You turn the ball over 14 times. But when all of those things do happen, this team can lose to anybody. And certainly you're right, they will lose to, a team like Auburn. And once again, kind of after the game, it's kind of said, I got to go watch the film. That obviously makes sense. He's not going to have an immediate deep dive on the nuances of what led Arkansas back in the game, but he pointed to turnovers yet again, Tony, 14 in this game. And again, coming from, one source in particular in this one, Mark Sears. And I do want to talk about some good that Mark Sears did in this game, because Nate Oats gave him some credit for some things. But Tony, this is now 19 turnovers in 3 games. The one kind of comment he made about that, kind of said some of these teams are really getting into him on our offensive end. We've got to figure out a way to get him a little more freed up. I'm interested to see how that goes moving forward, because this doesn't feel sustainable for Alabama to win games. I don't think he can keep turning the ball over this much. So I wonder, and, feel free to just give your 2 cents on either thing, how much of it is Mark just needing to clean things up, and how much of it is a scheme thing where you need to help, others need to give him more help to prevent him from making some of these errant passes, from getting into some of these turnovers that he kind of continues to have.
Well, yeah, but Ryan Pannone was on local radio this morning, and he basically said, like, they just got to make simple passes. I think sometimes Mark Sears tries to do too much, or tries to pass into traffic and make this like, home run pass, and it's I just don't know if that's always the best move. He takes some unnecessary risks, or he'll drive into the lane, looking for a call, and just drives into like 3 different people. I think he just needs to, I don't want to say, part of what makes Mark Sears good is his ability to take risks, and his I guess bravery on the court, if you will. Just his ability, his willingness to kind of take those chances, and sometimes they really pay off. But maybe just kind of tamper that down a little bit, because it is going to get in the way of Alabama's success, and they don't need it necessarily all the time. They've got the players to move the ball around a little bit more. You don't always have to take that home run pass if it's not the safest option. So Nate Oats is all about percentages, and I think that that goes. It's really easy to measure that maybe in shooting, but I think at the same time, you should also measure that in distributing the ball as well. Sometimes just take the high percentage pass, move it around. If it has to move around to 2 or 3 different guys instead of just trying to force it, then you have usually time to do that. That's why Alabama plays so fast. It'd be one thing if these things were happening with 5 seconds on the shot clock, but they're not. So that's part of why you play so fast, is that you get good looks. If they're not happening in the first 15 seconds, well, then you've still got 10 more seconds. Or 15 more seconds. So just kind of take the high percentage pass and move the ball around, and stop maybe taking these unnecessary risks.
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, I hate to be, because this feels so surface level, and I don't know, I hate to be the just slow it down guy. But I mean, if you look on KenPom, Alabama is still by far the fastest Power 5 team in the country. The next highest, they're number 1 in the country in tempo. The next highest team is Illinois at 13. I wonder how much of it is just a slow it down. I mean,
it's just like, and it's not even slow it down. It's not like just dribble the ball up the court. It's still go fast up the court. If nothing's there, that's why you dribbled it up the court. So you have time to find other options. The whole thing is to take advantage of them and to get it up there fast to get an option. And if it's not there, then you can kind of go into your half court a little bit and maybe find an option. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily playing slow. It's just you're taking the best shot. You're taking the best opportunity. And, there's no sense in, playing with a 15-second shot clock if it's not there. I mean, like, don't make things harder on yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's just, whether it's, and Sears is obviously, I think, going to get the bulk of it because he has the bulk of the ball. I mean, he is the catalyst for this offense when he's on the court. So, he might become the catalyst for some of these mistakes. But yeah, I think it's just slow it down to the extent of how can you still run your offense efficiently and quick without, sacrificing all these turnovers or leading into these turnovers. I just don't. It has been 3 games now. I don't see it sustaining itself kind of here moving forward.
Do you just play fast enough to get your shot? Don't play too fast that you force yourself into mistakes. But I still think you play fast. It's not a slowing it down thing. It's just a work with what you've got. And take the percentages. It's the same thing of saying like Alabama has to take threes. They don't have to take threes if the layup's there. You take it. I mean, and so if the shot's not there when you're hurrying up, then slow it down and wait until the shot's there. And if the other team's just playing expert defense that they stop you and and you go the whole possession, you still can't get a shot off, tip your hat, because that's not going to happen very often. I mean, especially not with this Alabama team with the talent it has. So, it's patience and it's like you said, it's efficiency, Jack. You just got to wait until you get your shot.
The other thing kind of Nate Oats talked about was on the other end of the floor defensively, in Alabama, kind of just switching off. In the first half, there was obviously some problems. Arkansas was at 0.19. They were a 1.2 3 in the second half, scoring wise. And the bulk of that, in kind of continuing fashion, and Tony, I want to turn to you because you wrote about this. It comes from the Razorbacks' best players. And we continue to kind of see this emerging trend of Alabama not really stepping up. I mean, Nate Oats talked about that, where he wants to see, a guy step up on some of these teams' best players. And, again, we don't see that. Leading scorer in this game, Zvonimir Visic, the Croatian 7-footer, can hit threes, had 27 points, made 5 of them, 3 blocks, 3 steals defensively, 7 rebounds as well. And then Adu Thiero, Arkansas's leading scorer, 22 points, 6 rebounds, finished on a +12, box plus minus. Tony, continues to go wrong. I know you wrote about some of the draft guys too that Alabama's kind of struggled against, but this has got to continue to be kind of frustrating for Nate Oats to see this, guys just not stepping up. Maybe they play good team defense. These individuals kind of continue to have big nights against Alabama.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the part of the reason why I wrote this is it's not necessarily the best sign heading into a game against Texas with Trey Johnson, who's the SEC's leading scorer. Yes, that's not necessarily, if I'm betting the over under on him, I think I'd go with the over, just the way that Alabama's played against, some of these big time, prospects. But if you look at it, heading into this Texas game, Alabama, just judging by ESPN's last mock draft last month, Alabama's played 10 projected first round picks, and most of them have gotten either just great games. You look at Dylan Harper for Rutgers have 37 points, or even if it hasn't been that much, it's been players at least playing to their averages. And you saw Adu Thiero got 22 points. Really, he should have had more points. He had his 4th foul, I think, with 14 minutes left. Had he not picked that up, I mean, it could be a different game, especially with the way, Arkansas was coming back. He could have picked that. He was bullying Alabama. And that's, you see that too many times where the player you go into the game circling just has a good game, or either exceeds or lives up to the standard or the expectation you had for him. And you'd like to see Alabama being the number 2 team in the nation, kind of stopping some of those guys, and really they haven't. Murray Boyles from South Carolina, they were able to stop him. Jeremiah Fierce from Oklahoma, for the most part, they were able to stop him. There's a few other guys, but for the most part, you look at Ivisic and Thero, and like they're getting, if Fland had played, you kind of almost have to think that he would have had a big game just because he wasn't hurt. That's just the way this Alabama team's been. Fortunately, though, I will say to Alabama's credit, in the 10 game against the 10 projected NBA draft picks, first rounders that they've faced, they're 7-0. So while they are allowing these star players to score, they're doing enough against their teammates to get wins. It's not like it hasn't cost them yet. We'll see. You still like to see Alabama do better against some of these star players, because you look at it in the tournament, Jack, and sometimes you can have a guy just absolutely go off in the tournament. You don't want to allow that. That's how you get upset. One of these teams, you get like an 8 or 9 seed that has a good player. And if they go off for 37, like, Harper did.
Harper.
Yeah. Like Harper did. I mean, I think, you could be in some big trouble in the tournament. So it's another case, just like we were talking about with Alabama kind of playing with fire the same way they are with turnovers, allowing the star players to either match or exceed their averages is not. You'd like to see them at least step up at least a little bit more often than Alabama has been.
Yeah, I can definitely become a proponent of the, let the big dog eat and just stop everyone else. If you let one guy score 50 points and no one else has above 5, you're going to win the basketball game. But
I mean, the Celtics kind of did that with Luka in the finals, but
Sure.
it only works. Once again, it's like playing with fire, right? Yeah.
It is a risky strategy. And, when you're in a tournament setting, that's not a best of 7 game series and you have time to adjust over a length amount of time against one team. You only have one kind of opportunity to scout and figure that out. And yeah, you're right. I would like to see a game for Alabama where you see something like Murray Boyles, you take him out of the game early and you're able to kind of contain him. So yeah, I think that's something I definitely want to see from Alabama going forward. And it's going to be interesting. We're going to talk in a second about another guy projected, of course, to go high in the draft that someone's going to have to probably step up and make plays against here. So we'll see how that kind of goes. Let's talk a few positives, Tony, because obviously Alabama did get the win in the end. And, to me, Nate has kind of talked about, and specifically with the turnovers thing, wanting to see more players step up, particularly his kind of veterans, those fifth-year seniors. That group was responsible for the final 6 points that Alabama scored in the game. Mark Sears had a layup. Grant Nelson had to tap in. Chris Youngblood. He did split a pair of free throws, but he did make 2 at the end of the game to kind of ice it. Nate Oats did compliment Sears. He said he thought his effort was great. Highlighted that steal that he had on the top of the key where he was just kind of isolating. I forget who it was bringing the ball. It might have been DJ Wagner for Arkansas, but kind of stole it from him in midcourt, went down, got a layup. Highlighted kind of his defensive effort. Grant Nelson, 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks in this game. Youngblood had 15. Sears was kind of inefficient, finishing double figures with 11. And the other guy I note, doing it again. He did play more minutes. Nate Oats only played him 11 minutes with an injury against Georgia, but Mohamed Diabate continues to be Mohamed Diabate, 14 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He had 4 turnovers. Only 1 came in the second half, so he cleaned that up as well. What did you like about Alabama's performance in this game? I feel like we've scrutinized a little bit, but what maybe positive takeaways, if any, do you have from this one?
Yeah, I mean, Diabate continues to be really good. I think you got to look at him as a positive, at least from the offensive side. I think you have to look at Aiden Sherrill. I think it's kind of a tale of 2 different sides of the ball with him. I thought he was very good on offense. Defensively, I think he kind of struggled a little bit, but it is nice to see him get the 7 points in 8 minutes. You'll take that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I asked Nate about after the game is Aiden Holloway. I think you need to see him shoot, or they need to get him more involved because another 2 of 4 performance from him from beyond the arc. He had a chance to hit what would have been a game winner, or not a game winner, but like a game icer that he missed. But I still think you there were times when Alabama was struggling, it's kind of like you got to find ways to get him the ball. He's such a good shooter, and maybe he needs to do more to get open or to get those opportunities. But either way, Alabama's got to find ways to get him the ball. But it was kind of a day where, you know, the points were more or less spread out. You know, it wasn't a bad, I guess it wasn't a great day for Mark Sears, but once again, I don't think it was like as bad as maybe the numbers look from him. I think it was just everyone kind of had to step up when they stepped up kind of day. You know, when you look at just the numbers, Alabama only making 5 threes kind of stands out to me. That's something you'd want to see improve, especially because you look at the two guys that made multiple threes. Chris Youngblood was 2 of 6, Aiden Holloway was 2 of 4. Maybe try to get them more opportunities, right? I mean, those are not bad percentages. And so, but, you know, in terms of things I liked, I mean, I liked that. You know, there's moments with, you know, if Cliff hadn't gotten into foul trouble, I kind of liked the way he was playing. I think he was kind of containing their bigs for the most part. But then once again, when he got into foul trouble, that's where, you know, Aiden Sherrill kind of, you know, was a little bit of a liability on defense. So it's a big, like, you know, up and down kind of plus and minus. I think you could have like a good and bad for each player. I guess my biggest standout, you know, like my player of the game would have been Mo Diabate. Just, you know, what he offers on defense combined with being 7 of 9. Yeah, once again, it's getting harder to explain why this guy doesn't start, but maybe that's because he's done so well off the bench.
Yeah, he continues to just be an X factor and in such limited minutes. I mean, it's incredible. 14 points in 15 minutes. He just makes the most of his time. Did have 4 turnovers and 4 fouls, like I said, but you know, I just think the activity on the other end is super hard to ignore. And yeah, I think it was for sure a tale of both ends to me in the paint for everybody other than Aiden Sherrill. I think, you know, the Avicic piece was really interesting because I don't think we've seen a true 7-footer who can shoot like that play against Alabama. And I thought pretty much everybody outside of Clifford Amore kind of struggled to guard him. And so I'm kind of intrigued when they have to play a guy like that again, if they have to play a guy like that again, you know, how they sort of deal with that. But on the other side of the ball, I mean, they had 54 points in the paint. They shot 54% from the field in a game where they only shot, like you said, 26% from 3. So I really thought they fed what was working. And it was good to see kind of that even points distribution in a game where, you know, it ended up, you know, kind of mattering and getting contributions from up and down this lineup. I mean, this team continues to have one of the deeper rotations in the country. And yeah, you do want to see Aiden Holloway get fed more, but anytime he has an off night, it's Mohamed Diabate stepping up. Or if, you know, Mohamed Diabate doesn't have a good night, Jaron Stevenson hits the offhand couple threes in a game, or, you know, it just continues to be kind of a different group of people. But I think, yeah, it was good that to see kind of this collective scoring effort, even when it wasn't one guy kind of heating up. And then when it came down to winning time, those guys did step up. Those 5th-year seniors made, you know, sort of big time plays to kind of seal the game. So, yeah, it was a good effort from Alabama. They end up winning the basketball game, but obviously a lot that Nate Oats wants to take away in terms of finishing games, punishing your opponent more, not kind of letting the foot off the gas. And they have another opportunity to do so on Tuesday, Tony. Yes, there is another game before the IBOB. Sorry, guys. But Alabama stayed on the road. They arrived late in Austin, Texas on Saturday, or I guess Sunday morning was probably more like when they got there. They will face Texas Tuesday night, 8 p.m. on ESPN. The Longhorns, 32 on Ken Palm. They have the 36 offensive rating, number 43 in defensive rating. Stat I noted, 3-point percentage. They're in the top 50 in the country. Good 3-point shooting team. They are led by a guy Tony's kind of looked at a little bit in Trey Johnson, this 6'6" kind of rangy guard, former teammate of LeBaron Philon at Linkier Academy in Branson, Missouri. And, you know, he'll kind of come in and he's Texas's leading scorer. Is just kind of a great shot maker. I know Tony has a little bit more about him, but another game here, another opportunity where, you know, there's this looming in the distance, big bad Auburn opponent, but, you know, you take a lot of hype out of that game if you don't take care of business in Austin, Texas. How are you feeling about this game, Tony?
Yeah, this is a big trap game. But then again, I think the what gives me confidence that Alabama will be ready to go is the blowing it kind of late, or almost blowing it kind of late against Arkansas might end up being a blessing for Alabama, because it allows Nate Oats to kind of be like, once again, a little late reminder of, if you don't have your head screwed on, this is what happens. And I'm sure that, he got onto them after that game. And so had Alabama just coasted to a win against Arkansas, I think this game against Texas would have been a little bit more dangerous. But now that, Alabama got that warning shot against Arkansas, I think they should come out ready to play. It's another case, Jack, of just, I feel like I've said this a million times on various podcasts that we've had. Alabama gets away with something and then gets to learn something and still gets to win. It's like a learning moment. They've had so many learning moments, and still a lot of the times you get those from losses, and Alabama's been able to get those from wins. So I think that late, the frustrating, or what did Nate call it? Irritating.
He was irritated.
An irritating second half against Arkansas probably ends up being a surprise little blessing of sorts. So I'm expecting Alabama to win. Between the two teams in this matchup, I think Auburn might be facing the bigger, if somebody's going to be upset, I kind of think Auburn at Vanderbilt could be an interesting one. And that would be interesting for Alabama, because I don't think Alabama wants to play an Auburn team that's lost 2 straight games. But we'll see. I'm expecting Alabama to handle business in Austin and Auburn to handle business in Vanderbilt and set up this huge game on Saturday for the SEC, for first place in the SEC standings. That's just what I'm expecting. But I mean, look, Trey Johnson, SEC leader in points, points per game, and they definitely have a team that can win, and it's hard to win on the road in the SEC.
Yeah, Trey Johnson, 19 points a game. He's shooting about 43% from the field, 80%, 87 from the line, about 38 from 3. So that
he's averaging
22
points over his last 5 games. So that 19 average is even better over the last 5 games.
Yeah, so he's even upped it there, as you heard. And I'm intrigued because he's kind of a bigger guard. I want to see what matchups they throw at him. Oates kind of talked about that. They might have to switch things up, go with size. Obviously, he was teammates with LeBaron Philon. I'm sure he has some experience guarding him in practices back at the high school level. How does that help Alabama? And I was really impressed. The biggest thing I was looking for with Alabama was how they would kind of answer that call, dealing with a lot of length against Arkansas. And they fed it in the paint and had a lot of really good success there. It was sort of a reverse from what I was expecting. They didn't hit a lot of threes, dealt with a lot of length. Texas does not have as much of that. I really like this Texas team, actually. Nate kind of talked about being surprised that they were only 15-9. I am too. I mean, Trey Johnson's obviously an NBA talent. They've got Tremont Mark at guard, another player who people will be very familiar with if you're an SEC fan, or for your Houston basketball fan, of course, too. Spent some time in Kelvin Sampson's program. Jordan Pope's another name to watch, an experienced guard. And then at forward, they have, I think, one of the beasts of the SEC. When you talk big man, Arthur Kaluma came over from Kansas State, had spent some time at Creighton as well. He's going to be kind of a monster inside. I wonder if he kind of guards Grant Nelson, him and maybe Caden Shedrick, the Virginia transfer, are 2 names I kind of look for there. But I do think Alabama is more talented on paper than this Texas team. But the Longhorns have some interesting wins. They are coming off of 2 losses to Vanderbilt, speaking of them, and Arkansas. So they're hungry for a win. Nate Oats is pulling out all the stops. He said he's used Nick Saban, he's used Tom Brady to help get these guys prepared, kind of show them those things of how you look at not a nameless, faceless opponent, but how you treat every opponent the same. He says, we want to treat this game like it's the Auburn game. He was kind of straight up with that. That's easy to say in principle, but it's up to the players to kind of go out and execute that. That's a mindset thing. And if you don't come out with the right one, this Texas team will burn you. Any other thoughts on them in this game before we're allowed to look ahead as members of the media. We do that all day long, but any final residual things from Arkansas, things you're looking to watch for from Texas, Tony?
Yeah, I just think that this is a good team. Texas had a bunch of players game time decision against in their last loss to Vanderbilt. I wonder, how healthy they'll be. I guess we'll see that tonight when the injury report comes back. I guess you'll probably know that. I guess we're talking on a Monday. You'll probably know maybe a little bit more from an injury standpoint where they'll be Tuesday morning when this comes out. But Yeah, like it's a tough Texas team. It is a surprising. I think it just speaks to. I think if you placed this Texas team in any other conference, they'd be a lot better than 4-7 in conference play. I think it's a team that's it should be a tournament team. It's probably going to be a bubble team now, and so I think that it's a team that knows it needs a big win against Alabama. When you get these things like Nate Oats talked about, Alabama's ranked number 2 now in the AP poll, number 1 in the coaches poll. I mean, that teams are going to play you a little bit differently when you're ranked like that. And Texas knows that if they can get this Alabama win on their resume, that it's going to go a long way towards them making the title. So that's just you got to have your guard up because you're going to get everyone's best moving forward.
Once again, 8 p.m. Tuesday night on ESPN. Alabama will have back-to-back games on ESPN. Of course, they had, I think, the ESPN game on Saturday as well against Arkansas. It's what you get when you're the number 3, nay, number 2 team in America, Tony. And that's what we'll end with. Just kind of quick, give a look ahead to Auburn, because that game got a whole lot more implications, a whole lot more fun. I know it's just a little number next to a team logo. It doesn't really matter for the NCAA tournament and what have you. But Alabama bumped up to number 2 in the AP poll, got the benefit of the Duke Blue Devils losing to Clemson, an unranked Clemson team on the road, got upset thanks to a wet floor and Cooper Flagg slipping at the end of the game. Auburn kept their spot at number 1, but that means it will be number 1 versus number 2 for the IBOB. Very, very exciting. The first ever number 1 versus number 2 meeting in the history of the SEC in men's basketball, which is just wild. College game day is, of course, going to be in Tuscaloosa. Of course, it's the highest ranked both these teams will be for this rivalry game because it's number 1, number 2. Just insanely exciting stuff. I guess, your thoughts on that, as well as, anything residual. We talked about Nate Oats' response today. I think he was probably getting kind of annoyed with it. He's just kind of asked about how you not look ahead to that game instead of maybe some of the nuances with Texas. But the stories are the stories. Just really exciting game coming to Coleman, Tony.
It's the biggest game in college basketball this year. Easily. You got a 1-2 rivalry game. It doesn't matter, if you're from. That's not an SEC bias. That's not a state of Alabama bias. It's the biggest game college basketball's had this year. So, it's going to be interesting to see how Alabama responds. You mentioned College Game Day being there. That College Game Day was there for the Tennessee game last year. Alabama lost that. So, I'm sure they're going to want to win. If you don't, you're going to start hearing about, maybe the College Game Day curse. I know that was at one point before Nick Saban got things rolling. I think the football team had a little bit of a College Game Day curse getting started. So, hopefully for Nate Oats' sake, they don't have that, I guess, in the basketball end. But, it'd be exciting to see just all the hype around this game, because, I mean, it really is. It's not just the rivalry. It's not just 1 versus 2. It's going to be a really important game in the SEC standings, and neither of these teams are slipping up at all. So the head-to-head, Alabama's going to have to finish the season off at Auburn. That's going to be a really tough game to win. So it's almost like you have to split at least. So you got to win this game for Alabama. If it's going to be hard to win the SEC regular season title if you don't win this game, assuming that Auburn just doesn't slip up. They haven't been, and neither has Alabama, so both these teams have been kind of waiting for each other to slip up, and they haven't. So these head-to-head matchups are going to be so vital. And it's just been building to this for so long. I mean, the offseason kind of seemed like a Cold War with both teams just building up these super rosters, and now we're just going to get to see them on the court. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I think, you harken back to maybe I won't make it this dramatic, but my favorite movie is Miracle. And then, you almost think about that. Although that's a little different because it's more two. Yeah, you're right. It's more 2 superpowers instead of a plucky underdog.
Like the Soviets playing the Soviets, But,
it's just, you got Cold War. I was a history minor. My mind just got rolling. That's all. But yeah, I'm so excited for this game. It's unprecedented. I mean, it's really, really exciting. And, I think going into this Texas game, Nate Oats has said the right things. But again, you got to execute, because if you want to keep the hype that is building, You got to win this game that's right in front of you. Auburn, of course, has to accomplish the same as Vanderbilt. I mean, Bruce Pearl, I heard a quote from him after they lost to Florida, kind of said a similar thing to Nate Oats. He was like, we weren't the better prepared team, and we haven't been in some of these games, and we knew a team was going to come in here and pick us off, and they of course lost at home. So that kind of shows you can't overlook anybody, but we can as the media, and we are. And I'm very, very excited for this game because this is going to be just incredibly fun between Alabama and Auburn here on Saturday. But of course, first and foremost, the Texas game. We'll have a recap of that, and of course, the Iron Bowl preview for Friday's show. Go subscribe over on Tide Illustrated. We'll have plenty of coverage in the week leading up to Auburn as well. Some recruiting stuff coming out, some commitment news upcoming, and announcement dates and all that whatnot. So plenty to go subscribe over on Tide Illustrated there. Subscribe here on the YouTube. Give us a follow on Spotify if you're listening along, and we'll see you next time.